Hi, everybody. Welcome to the SVK Network Restaurant Business Show. My name is Jim Taylor. Excited to be back and have another good conversation, hopefully to provide some good insight for all of you restaurateurs out there that are, working through what's going on in the world right now. Today, we're going to be interviewing Andrew Scott from Ownershift. He's got lots of good insight for us on people and training and how to combat what's going on in terms of inflation, labor shortages, and looking forward to some good discussion. So roll it, Jay. Morning, Andrew.
How's it going?
Great, thanks. How are you?
Doing good.
Good. Happy to have you on the show. I think that we've got a topic that lots of people are interested in hearing about with inflation and this labor shortage that's going on right now. So I think you and I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we should just jump right in. I mean, we were having some discussion a couple of days ago about this, but I think people are eager to hear what your take is on what's happening, and you've got a broad reach in North America, and I think people are really interested. So I thought I'd just jump right in and ask you right away. In your opinion, right now, just broad strokes, how should owners and operators be looking at business differently these days in terms of labor and inflation?
Yeah, you know what? There's so many changing factors, and what I see owners do a lot. I've said this before on shows that they try and put too much work onto themselves, and what I mean by that is they try and take on a lot of different things, and they're not really focused in any one area, and they don't necessarily know week to week what they need to be able to do in order to be successful. And a lot of operators I see, they're doing a lot of the front line work because they don't have access to the labor pool that they want. And because of that, then they're not able to keep up on things like inflation, or like adjusting their prices or adjusting their menu or doing things like that, because they're literally in the kitchen serving tables and behind the counter in a lot of cases. So the real thing we need to do every day is figure out, okay, what are the things that I need to do in order to move my business forward at this point in time? So today, what's the one thing I can do that's going to make an impact in my business, and not just staying afloat, but actually moving it forward? And then day after day, week after week, just repeating that process. And one of those big things is knowing what your numbers are. And because we're talking about inflation and a lot of those things, and how this ties in too is a big part of the inflation has been also the wage inflation, right? To go along with the wage shortage. So labor shortage. So what I'm seeing people do realistically is think, hey, I don't have the money to pay people more money, right? And so then it's almost like they're in this loop where they can't hire because they can't afford to pay people, and then they're stuck in the cycle and they do more work themselves, and it's hard to get out of that. So there's a lot going on and a lot we can dive into, but yeah, trying to figure out what is that problem I'm trying to solve in my business at any given point of time and focusing in on that.
Yeah, and you just made a comment about just thinking about the business differently and actually spending time working on the business. And I actually saw a post that you made, I don't know if it was today or yesterday, about the difference between a frontline worker and doing the job, and then someone in leadership, management, or ownership actually having, thinking about things differently. Yeah. So, and you spent a lot of time, I think, working with restaurant groups on that, but it's definitely a time to think about the business differently. And, how would you encourage people to think about their team and how their team can help support them in battling what's going on right now?
Yeah, you know what? I hear this all the time, and there's some old myths that we have to dispel here, which one of them is, no one's going to care like the owner cares. No one can do what you do. I hear a lot of no one wants to work anymore. I hear a lot of like those types, of limiting beliefs that come out. And I don't believe that people don't want to work anymore. I think that people are much more selective of where they do want to work, and they are much more picky about where they go because they have options that may not have been there before. So what does that mean for us? Well, in a labor market specifically, that means we need to actually showcase why we would be a good fit, why we would be better than other places to work at, even when it comes to our hiring ads, literally the job title that we're putting up on Indeed or Facebook ads or whatever the case is. Like it can't just be line cook or server. It has to be something line cook, average line cook makes X amount with tip out, or it has to be something that would really appeal to them. Why should they work here versus any of the literal 1,000 other jobs that are posted, right? The people haven't changed. The difference is that it is a much more competitive market than what it used to be. We used to fight for customers. We are now fighting for employees. And so I think that's one of the shifts that people need to make is we have to realize that we are marketing to employees, right? It is not, 20 years ago where you could turn people away left and right. You have to do this, must be able to live 50 pounds. I saw one the other day, must be able to swoop and bend in a job ad. And I'm like, okay, no, like I get it. But by the same token, that doesn't tell me why I should want to work there. Right. And that's the culture that we need to shift in the restaurant industry, which unfortunately is the reason why some people have left the industry because, there were greener pastures elsewhere. So that's the reality of what we're facing today.
Right. I was having an interesting conversation a few days ago about the strategy around if the best recruiting strategy in your market right now is a recruiting bonus or is $1 more than minimum wage, something like that we've seen happen for a long time, a recruiting bonus, retention bonus, or a little bit more than minimum wage. An interesting exercise to go through would be to say, okay, what would rank as a 12 out of 10 or a 15 out of 10 and absolutely blow away somebody who might be looking for work. And, the example was actually if a 15 out of 10 would be buy them a car on their first day, obviously that's not going to happen, right? But what would a 12 out of 10 look like? What would an 11 out of 10 look like? Because if your competitors aren't going that far, I agree with you. My stance is that a lot of people have left the industry, but there's still almost every place has some staff. So if we can, find ways for restaurants to be a little bit better than their competition, they're going to be able to find those people to come to work, I think.
Yeah, no, and I'll be totally honest as well. One of the things that we did, and so here's what I've explained before on a show like this, but I want to make sure you guys understand that there are two major seasons per year that are very difficult to hire in. Number one, we have mid-August to mid-September in Canada. We would call that the hiring dead zone. My organization, we just don't hire during that period of time because it is so difficult to hire. After Thanksgiving, things start to turn around a little bit. And that was before COVID, right? It was always a hard time no matter what, because guess what happens? Everybody goes back to school. A lot of people are moving to university and so on. So the demographic we hire from normally is in a massive shift. And so what that means is soon as everyone gets 2-week notices, things like that, everyone starts to hire, which means the competition is fierce. Now, COVID has amplified that, right? And the unemployment supports, all of that stuff. It has all been amplified now, which is what we've been dealing with. But that is one time. The next one is in the spring as well, which is, April and May would be the other big time. So the answer to this is to get ahead of it. We should be hiring 2 months in advance of when that turnover is going to happen, because guess what? It's going to take you a couple of weeks to hire people. It's going to take you another 4+ weeks to train them and get them up to where you need to be. So therefore, you're actually not hiring that far in advance. That's one thing that I want to make sure we focus on, is that the timing itself is really, really important. But then COVID has made this all worse. And so to get to that 15 out of 10, we have to be looking at what our competition is doing. And literally, I spend my days with clients looking in the Indeed job postings in their area. What is this place offering? What is this place offering? Because if one place is offering, $16 or $17 an hour versus $14.35, which is the minimum wage in Ontario, who are they going to apply for? Because all they have is the job title, the restaurant, and the pay. That's all they have to choose from. So what are they going to do? They're going to choose the most perceived highest paying job, or the best job for them, or what they perceive to be. Even though if you pay $14.35 and you have an excellent culture, how can you relay that in one line, right? So that's the kind of thing we have to look at. So anyway, I'm working with this a lot of clients right now, and it is tough, but that's the way we need to think, and that's how we have to change our thinking right now.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with a restaurateur the other day. I'm curious your take on this, because we were talking about all the strategies that, could be implemented in an effort to combat rising cost of goods and this whole inflation and, the supply chain issues that are happening. And, Canada just announced the highest inflation rate since 2003. I mean, it's right in your face, right? Everybody knows it. And the conversation we were having was about trying to find innovative other ways to combat those things, because you can only raise your prices so high. And, there is a threshold, and I see it all the time. People are making mistakes where they're raising their prices too high, and it's creating issues with their client base. And so the conversation we were having was actually about retention and about, looking at opportunity to save money in other areas to combat those rising costs. And that area that we ended up having a big discussion was about retention and saving money in turnover, and saving money in the recruiting fees that people are spending, and the $500 signing bonus and all those things that are happening right now. Because if you don't have to spend that money, you can use it elsewhere.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Do you spend time working with your clients on recruiting or retention, or what's your take on those two things? What is your thought process there?
Yeah, no, that's great. So one of the big things we do in the hiring process is focus on the retention and longevity perspective, right? Because one of the things we train people on is that every time you make a hire, you are committing a minimum of $1,000 to that person. You are spending that amount of money in between the time it takes to hire them, then to bring them and to train them and have someone else shadow them and train them. By the time you add that up, the mistakes, potentially losing customers because of those mistakes made in training, things like that, it's going to cost you $1,000, right? And so one of the biggest switches we made years ago was to change how we do our hiring, to make sure we ask those longevity questions and focus on how do we retain more people. So our average longevity of employees went from 3 months to 3 years. So through the changes we made, it significantly reduced our labor costs. And this is also counterintuitive as well. And people don't believe me when I say this, but you probably have excellent people in your business, right? I ask every client, I say, you probably have someone that does the work of 2 people, right? Mm-hmm. But they're all getting paid the same. So what would happen is if you were able to raise the wage for those people that do that extra work, you give them a couple dollars more or a bonus or whatever it is, and then make that your entire workforce, right? So instead of maybe having 5 people or 10 people on a shift, you can go with 20% less. By only paying them a little bit more, it actually saves you far more by being way more efficient with your labor, by having the right people and not having the turnover and the training and all those things that drag numbers down. And not only does it drag you down, it drags your time down, because every time you're short-staffed, the management has to step in, fill those gaps. The ownership has to step in and fill those gaps. And that basically forces your hand, so you can't work on the marketing or finances or any of the other pieces of the business that need your attention.
Right. So would you say that that's the biggest mistake that you see people making right now in terms of the hiring and training thing, is just that they get stuck doing the job themselves?
Oh, 100%. And this happens and what I say to people, and again, this is easier said than done, and I get that. But the goal is that you need to get to a place where you can allocate your time and have the freedom to allocate your time where it is best served in the business. Maybe one day you want to work a closing shift, or another you want to work over lunch service, or maybe you need to spend time in the front or the back or wherever it might be. Usually when you're short-staffed, you go where you're needed. Right? Someone calls in sick, you fill in the gaps. And because of that, you start to lose sight. I actually had a client yesterday we were talking about, and he came in and he's like, when I was doing everything myself, I couldn't even see the holes in my business. But now that I'm removed from it and I'm actually looking for ways to make it better, I found about 100 different things that we were doing wrong that now really eke out that last little bit of profitability for us, and how to drive sales and how to make things more efficient. But he never would have seen that if he was stuck on the line the entire time.
Right. So do you have an example of a business that you've worked with? I mean, you don't have to name the business, but a group or a business that you've worked with that had a team that was really dialed in on all the things that helped them battle all the rising costs that are going on, whether it was retention, a team atmosphere or something like that they had built, or something that they had done training wise to get them to battle the inflation that's happening. Have you seen anything good going on out there?
Yeah, you know what? And there's a lot of here's some things that they do a little bit differently. So they treat their team culture very, very differently. They care about their people. They have regular meetings with their teams, one-on-one. And this doesn't really happen in our industry very much, but actually having one-on-one meetings between a manager and employee. And basically they have a structure where there's a manager and then team leads and then the front line. And basically the team leads will have meetings with the front line, and then managers will have meeting with the team leads and so on. But everyone literally has a meeting every week about how we can improve things, what's going on in their lives, how do we know what might be coming down. We get them to rate their happiness on a scale of 1 to 10 in the position. So all of a sudden, if it drops below an 8, we're asking questions. Okay, what needs to happen? That leads to a huge retention rate. But not only that, in these same meetings, we are looking at food, labor, things like that every single day to be able to say, hey, so you know what? We need to trim our labor. This is our target. We are 1% off. We need to really get that down. Here's food. Okay. How can we contribute to that? All right. We have to go into our prep waste. We have to look at our portioning. We have to look at our errors. We have to look at all of these other elements. So these are just normal conversations. And in my organization, and what I teach our clients to do is we literally have our food, labor, sales, our third-party ratings, all of those things are on display every week, and we update them every week. We monitor our labor numbers daily, our food numbers weekly, and those are the types of things that we get our entire team to do. So we're laser focused on the results that we want, and when there is an issue, we can address it fast. And so getting the whole team on board, because everyone gets surprised by this, but when you actually give your team a goal to work for, they actually try and do it if you have the right people.
And I'm sure you would agree with this, but I find that our industry is notorious for hoarding information, for keeping information amongst the management or the ownership and not sharing what's happening in the business with the people that are actually the ones that are doing the job every day. And you're right. I find that every one of the businesses that I've ever worked with that has a board or has a front and center piece of information showing the team what's actually happening, they likely get better results.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
There's one takeaway or recommendation from our conversation so far today. I think that's one of them. That's for sure. Yeah. Share what's happening with your team.
Yep, because it's in their hands. Literally, your profitability is in their hands, whether it be through prep, production, anything like that. Servers, even upselling certain items, asking the right questions, making recommendations, things like that. Your profit is literally in your employees' hands, and so if they're flying blind, not knowing whether what they're doing is good or bad or making an impact, how can you change those results?
Right. Great. Well, I think we're probably ready to take a little bit of a break here. Looking forward to having a little bit more discussion about this with you, Andrew. I think you've got some really good insight and definitely making an impact in the industry right now. So we'll be back in a minute, and thanks a lot so far.
Our table is set, and we have a seat just for you. At Sysco, we love what we do, and that is delivering success for our customers through industry-leading people, products, and solutions. Our team is the difference between good customer relationships and great ones. Your dedicated sales consultant is here to help you grow your business. They will connect you with the products, solutions, and insights you need to grow your profits, streamline your operations, and market your business. They'll offer you customized consultations with our chefs and industry specialists to answer your questions and inspire you. Our specialists can help with protein, fresh local produce, takeout and delivery solutions, and more. And if you simply need someone to answer a quick question, our Customer Connect team is just a phone call or chat message away. Sysco is at the heart of food and service and connecting the world to share food and care for one another. Join us for a seat at the table. Visit sysco.ca to learn more.
Okay, welcome back, Andrew. Thinking about our conversation over the last 15 minutes or so here, and just in terms of our discussions in the past around what you do with clients, what's your take on menu pricing? it's in front of us all the time, this inflation thing, and everybody's talking about rising prices or, changing the menu dynamic, shrinking the menu, all of that type of stuff. So what's your feeling around menu pricing? Are we going to continue to see it rise, or is there other ways to battle that?
Yeah. You know what? I think there absolutely is going to still be an inflationary pressure until things go back to whatever normal looks like. And in the conversation I have with a lot of clients, there's two things we talk about quite a bit. One of which is, are you a business or are you a charity? So that's the first thing we have to assess. And everyone says, "Oh, of course I'm a business." Okay, well, how come you're not priced to actually make money? But the root cause of that is often because they don't know their numbers and they don't know what their input costs are. They don't know how those have shifted. So it's really crazy to kind of see that they say, "Oh, well, we clearly need to raise our prices by 10 or 20%," when in reality, it actually might not be anywhere close to that. They might only have to raise their prices by 5%, right? So, but by doing the numbers and knowing that stuff, it's the nitty gritty work that most owners have never done. And that's what really helps us get there. So, the second piece is that it likely won't be as much of an increase as you think it will. Or there may be certain items that are way out of price, like bone-in wings, for example, are one item that we talk about a lot that have really jumped in price. However, boneless wings haven't, right? So basically, the way that I'm looking at that is we need to know which items have moved up in price, which ones haven't, and then we need to kind of engineer our menu around it. There may be people that will still order that item, but the other thing too is we also you can't go broke and lose money every time you're doing it. Like I literally had a client came in the other day after food and labor, their gross profit margin was minus $500. So every time they sold a product, they basically lost money. So clearly there's an issue there with pricing that we need to address. So
we've got a question here from Darren Adair talking about that so many businesses are using increased wage and bonuses, which I'm sure you're seeing everywhere. That signing bonus thing is all over the place. So how do you approach getting them to focus on the rest of the business, i.e. culture, so that the efforts they're making on investment are not just increasing their labor costs?
Yep.
What are your thoughts?
Absolutely. Well, and the number one thing is first, having the right people, because here's my thought process on this. When you have the right people, you can get them to do anything, right? So I'm sure we've all been there before, and I've done this in my own restaurants. Someone would come to me and say, "Andrew, I need a raise. I need to get paid more." And I would say, "No problem. If you do this and this and this, I will give you a raise." And then over the next couple of weeks, they do those things, right? And then after that, they get their raise and they go right back to the same performance.
Right.
So I've actually been a big proponent for me of actually raising the wages of people who have never asked for it, but deserve it. And so proactively doing that is huge. And so that's something that I focus on, because if you give the wrong person more money, they're still going to be the wrong person, right?
Very true.
So that's my thought process. It all comes down to the people we have in our organization and creating the culture, because, the culture is something that just doesn't happen, right? And what I look at this is when we bring people together in our organization, someone doesn't fit, that starts to erode the culture, right? If someone doesn't mesh with the values that we have, that starts to erode the culture. So it's what we defend. And the people we have in there need to know what is acceptable and what is not. And we create that as leaders. But if we are just bringing people in that might have, higher pay rates or whatever the case is, but don't fit within our values, then that's the kind of thing that we are going to lose. So what I would say is the best way to make sure that, your investment is well worth it is by investing in the right people and training the right people. That would be my thought process, because no matter who it is, if they are the wrong person, no matter how much culture you try and bring into them and how much you try and get them to adopt your values, if they are not their own values, it'll be a very tough thing to do. Yeah. So I've seen that time and time again, and it is almost never worked. It all starts from the very front, and then be laser focused on keeping the people that fit within your company and are what makes you great. Having said that, I think we've raised wages 3 or 4 times since the pandemic started, and we're probably going to do it again. Just for an example, in my own restaurant, our starting wage is $16 an hour, and we're in a QSR. And basically, and then it all goes up from there, supervisors, managers, and so on. Whereas all of our competition's paying $14.35 still as a minimum wage. So, we've bumped that up, and that may not be a crazy wage, but that was a choice that we had to make to make sure that we were above what a lot of our competition is offering, right? And we will probably raise that again. So that's just what our focus is, on being able to attract the best and keep the best in the industry.
Right. Your comment about paying the right people the right amount and not paying the wrong people more is a really important lesson, I think, and an important piece of information. I've worked with a couple of organizations that did large surveys of employees around what the company could do better, or what the organization could do better. And one of the things that came across as one of the top pieces of feedback from the staff every time was deal with problem employees faster, because it negatively affects the culture. And, I find when I was an operator and talking to operators all the time, they're worried about, if I let that person go, or if I deal with that person, the rest of the team will be upset, or it'll make people have to work harder, or I'll have to fill in and take on some of that work. And the reality is that the team usually appreciates it, and they're happy to take on the extra work, because the person who was negatively impacting the culture isn't there anymore. And I think that there's a roadblock there for a lot of operators, because they don't view it in the right way. So I feel there's an opportunity there to, like you said, not reward the wrong people, or actually deal with them.
Yeah, 100%. It's just because what happens if they stay, right? So it's hard with them, and it would be hard to let them go. But which one's going to be better for your business in the long run? They're both hard, but you got to choose your hard, right? Are you going to eventually lose other people because you have negative, influences or negative examples in your team? So are you then going to lose the good people? And I've seen this happen time and again, where you have people that don't fit your culture. They don't perform the job the way they should. They're a burden on the rest of the staff. And realistically, what happens is you end up losing the good people because they're tired of picking up the slack for the negative ones.
Right? Yeah.
So this is something that happens consistently, but we're afraid to make that choice. And I would argue that that's one of the things that actually keeps your business where it is.
And I think, you've been an operator, I've been an operator. We've all been in that position where, there's a person that we know might not be the right fit for the culture. And, here we are trying to figure out if it's the right thing to keep them or not. And it might actually be costing us money. So, in terms of strategies around how to impact, or how to combat against rising costs, not keeping the wrong people in your business is probably one of them in one way.
Yeah, because think about it this way. Like we all think about this, and we're paying people far more than what they maybe deserve, or whatever the case is, right? And the way I'm looking at it too is that those people that we're paying all of this extra money to, they're probably not the ones that are looking after your business, right? They're not the ones that are okay, here's a perfect example for me. So in my organization, you may or may not, I still have 4 locations, and one of my manager called me from one of the locations, and there was an issue with our chef space, which is where we house all of our meats. And so, it was totally full, at close. And basically what happened was it had gotten unplugged when we pull it out to sweep behind it and so on, and the closing procedures. So basically all of the meat had went above temperature overnight. They went into their temp checks in the morning. And then all of a sudden it was like, everything was bad. And so literally what happened is they call me and they're like, Andrew, are you sitting down? Like, we just wasted, a 700 or, however much product there was. So it could have been more. I haven't done the math on it. But basically they're like, are you sitting down? This is going to be terrible. Literally my manager in training is crying beside the actual manager who's calling, giving me, and she's like, yeah, she won't even come to the phone because she's so emotional about it. So when your team is literally in tears because someone made a mistake that cost you money, those are the type of people you want in your organization. They care so much that it literally ruined their day. And they were so frustrated to the point where other staff members are like, oh my God, like, do we need to, Uber over a coffee or like a treat or something to cheer them up? Or and everyone was apologizing for something that they may or may not have had an impact on. And that is your people taking care of your business. Right. And I think we accept so much less from that in our businesses every day. There are people like that out there, and we need to reward those people far more than what you are probably comfortable with. But those are the people that are going to make your business better every day.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good example and good lesson. I mean, I don't know if we should say that, people who are crying every day are the ones that really care about that keep those ones and reward them, because we don't want to put that stress on them. But I think that's a really good example. And, you're right. You have to be able to find a way to identify the people who really care.
Yeah.
'Cause you're right. They'll help take care of the business. So, a couple of the things that I've just, making some notes and some takeaways that I have just from your insight today, or pay the right people the right amount, and understand that will pay dividends down the road, and it will actually help to combat the rising costs that are happening, because they will take care of your business. I really like the sharing results with the team concept, because we need to rally the troops these days more than ever. I keep saying to people that the industry needs to work together more now than it ever has.
Yeah.
And so, I think that goes all the way down to the front lines and the staff. Knowing the information that's out there, like you said, everybody's talking about rising prices, and, how high can I raise the price for a steak or for a chicken dish or whatever that might be on the menu, or the chicken wings, like you said. So really knowing the information, and, a 2 to 5% increase in your prices might actually get you the result you need. And therefore you don't have to go 15 or 20%, which could upset customers. 100%. And then, I think just looking for other ways that the industry is operating that you may not have thought of. And I think reaching out for support to people like you is always a good strategy, because, there are experts out there that can help. So,
there's one other thing I was thinking of really quickly, is also just the term of value, right? So we picture our pricing as a line. And if in my business being a QSR, if you are providing a $15 experience for $10, that differential of $5 is value, right? However, if you're charging $15 for a $10 experience or product, then that value equation goes the other way. And that's where you start to lose customers as well. So the question I have is, if you do have to raise your prices, and if you do have to move those things up, and I have no doubt that everyone will, if they have not already, how can you add more value to your customers? Can that be in service? Can that be in another way? How can you provide value to your customers that will go above and beyond what the pricing is, right? And that's the thing where, as a strategy to retain customers, even when prices do go up, how can we give them more than what they're expecting? And it might not be in ways that are expensive at all. It could be in training your servers differently. It could be in adding something to the menu that to each dish, for example, that wasn't there before, but is now, but doesn't really cost you a whole lot. Like, how can you take that experience and elevate it a little bit? Like, there's many ways to do it, which will differ based on each of your restaurants and concepts and so on. But how can you add more to the customers as you raise prices? Not necessarily more product, but how can you elevate things so that when they come away being like, that was expensive, but it was worth every penny, because that's where we want to be.
Yeah. I think that's great too. Clearly you have a ton of experience and really good input on the industry right now. So I appreciate all of your feedback or comments or insights. I think that people listening today probably will take a lot away from what you're doing. And if you want to find Andrew, there's been some banners going across, but it's ownershift.com, right?
Ownershiftraining.com. Yeah.
Ownershiftraining.com. There it is. And, thanks again, Andrew. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Awesome.
Have a good day.